My name is Lily Zuckerman, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Chris Staley today and his lecture, The Dirt on Teaching. Other than his ever-present blue button-down shirts, one can always expect Chris to be asking questions and listening intently. What propels you to make? How do you convey meaning? How do you take risks and honor mistakes? How do you foster honest communication? In his recent position as the Penn State Laureate, Chris Staley created about 30 YouTube videos on a variety of topics such as fire, hands, beauty, and slow time. I would recommend them all to you as a peek inside how this teacher, maker, and thinker works. From his 25-year career teaching at Penn State University, Chris has plenty to say about teaching and learning. So please silence your phones and join me in welcoming Chris Staley.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you for being here. So I have been teaching for a long time, and I just want to share with you some of the things that I've learned. And there's sort of this three things you work with when you're in a ceramics class. You have the clay and the students and the teacher, and there's sort of this eutectic. And I've noticed over the years what's happened is actually the clay has actually shaped my sort of clay pedagogy or changed how I've taught. So I want to sort of share with you how the clay has sort of informed my teaching. One of the things you learn when you get older is you can look back and you can think of mistakes that you've made. And I think that one of the things that has become apparent to me, that one of the things that's essential about learning is humility. And I can think of a particular time where I wish I could relive it when I was at Anderson Ranch and MC Richards was there and I was young and I was sort of so intent on making good pots. And I heard that she was there and I saw her, but I thought, I'm just too involved in teaching and making good pots. And I regret not having more humility and not going up to her and asking her about teaching and so forth. And it's only years later that I've gone back numerous times and read her book, Centering, and there's an amazing chapter on pedagogy, and even the word pedagogy, it means, when literally translated in Latin, it means child-led. And I think how poignant that is, because ultimately when children learn, there's this sort of naivete or raw enthusiasm to learning, and how to capture that in a college classroom can be a challenge. But one of the things that's amazing about this material that we're all interested in is just the possibilities of it, and then how antithetical it is to most classroom situations. And I'll never forget the first time I touched clay as a sophomore in high school. I thought this was incredible. I was touching this material that was from the earth, and I was in school, and I literally thought I'd died and gone to heaven. It was like such a special experience. And I still marvel at that. Here I'm at a major research university, and we're allowed to play with clay. But I thought a lot about what happens in the classroom and what's sort of unique, and the issue of subjectivity and curiosity and the sensory and the collaborative. And those are all sort of four unique aspects that I think are offered in teaching art and clay, and I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on that. I think all of us in this room have your own story, your own powerful story. And art is about expressing that story or your relationship to the world around you. But sometimes we don't even know our own story. So just asking questions of students to try and understand what it is so unique and special that they have to offer. I had moved every 2 or 3 years when I was growing up, and my mother just said, go outside and play. So most of my time would just spend outside playing, and I thought that was sort of an unusual thing. But I'm teaching this class right now, and one of the articles I always ask or hand out is about dinner time and the ritual of dinner. And what was it like when you were growing up? What do you remember about your dinner time and your relationship to ceramics? It is so profoundly how different they all are. And I just did this a couple weeks ago, and one of the students in this class said, I was raised by a single parent, and my mother had to work late. So basically, I fended for myself. And she said, I can remember setting the popcorn on fire, and the smoke alarm went off, and the neighbors came by. And when the students hear other students tell these personal stories, something magical happens in that class because they realize they're not alone, but they also realize how profoundly different they all are. And not everyone has a Norman Rockwell sort of upbringing. So there is a hierarchy in the kitchen. It's always curious to me which pots get used and which pots don't, and sort of asking these questions that are sort of part of how we live on a day-to-day basis. The other thing is curiosity. I start every class with what I call trivia for the day. The word trivia comes from ancient Rome. There was basically where three roads came together. So you can be excited about something every day. And about a couple of years ago, we had a visiting artist, Matt Groves, he came and he said, yeah, the word potholes came from England, where the potters were always looking for clay. They'd always dig in dirt roads. And so, oh, the damn potters are digging holes again, those potholes. So, you know, it's phenomenal how much you can learn. We have a current grad student, Eric Thornton, and he's dealing with whether to make square plates or round plates. And then manholes actually can't fall through the manhole because of the diameter. But square plates, if you turn them at an angle, and I took my 2-inch ruler, and sure enough, they actually fall through. So this sort of just curiosity may be the reason the plates are round. There's multiple reasons if you Google it. But if you ask these questions, all of a sudden you realize that everything is a possibility for a question. And so the other thing about ceramics is it's sensory. It's amazing how you can, if you link that tactility with learning, you don't forget it. So I had a whole kiln load of nesting bowls. Half of them were porcelain, half were stoneware. They were all hollow rimmed, and I thought I'd fire it really slowly. Well, all the stoneware ones blew up, and none of the porcelain ones did. And I thought, why? And I'll just briefly, all the stoneware had ball clay, and all the porcelain was kaolin. Ball clay is the most finest particle clay, and none of the air could permeate through the walls. But in the porcelain, so clay evokes, or these physical things evoke sort of tactility. The other thing about clay, there's no other material that people want to watch other people work with it. Why is this so? It's a profound question, actually. No other painters don't come and demo. But it's this idea of, if it's this idea of thinking hands, this combination of how you think, how you feel, and how you touch, that's absolutely revealing and magical. And so this idea, the last thing I want to touch on is this idea of collaboration. You know, competition doesn't work in the classroom. And the reason Finland's been ranked #1 in the world in terms of secondary education is because the teachers speak 40% less in class time than United States teachers do. This was an art and life class a number of years ago, and there were 24 amazing teachers in this class. They had such profound things, and they listened to each other. So how do you create an atmosphere where everyone in the class is empowered in some way? And so Peter McLaren is an amazing educator. He said there's 3 styles of teaching. He says there's the hegemonic overlord, and that's sort of how we teach on the left. The teacher's at the podium, and there are these rows. And then there's the entertainer, how dynamic or charismatic. And then there's a liminal servant. Can you create the circle in the class where everyone's part of the circle and there isn't any hierarchy? And so collaboration is a really thing that's pushed a lot now. And I think that collaboration can be good, but also that solitary teaching as well. But one of the things I've learned about collaboration with students and other faculty is when it really works, there's both respect and trust. And this is Stu Kestenbaum, the director of Haystack. And Stu and I taught a creative writing and pottery class. And I asked my students, I said, what is trust? When do you trust somebody? And they said, trust is when someone is honest and they do what they say they're going to do, and they do it consistently. Trust is when you share your doubts and feelings and insecurities with somebody, and you realize it'll be held in confidence and not put out in the gossip mill that might come back and hurt you. These are powerful things, and these are things that are established with both students and amongst faculty as well. Once I was at a Haystack board meeting, and Jack Lenore Larson came up to me, and he said, Chris, do you know what the most meaningful or important art school in the 20th century was? or is? And I said, no. And he said, well, it's a Black Mountain School. And so I've done a lot of research, and one of the reasons why it was so powerful, there was no hierarchy there. The hierarchy was curiosity, the creative process, and learning. And I thought, if you read a lot about the Black Mountain School, it's particularly amazing because Robert Turner founded the ceramics program there in 1949 and ended up having these amazing conversations with Clement Greenberg and de Kooning. And it was just this open atmosphere, and everyone learned so much. Peter Volkus was completely transformed there when he talked to Franz Klein, the painter, and so forth. And we're sort of trying to recreate that now in our world. And this is just a question mark that's on the door of the faculty offices at Penn State. And it's one of the most profound things I heard in graduate school was from a professor, and I asked him, what do you think of these covered jars? And he said, I don't know. And I never forgot that, because here is this professor that didn't know, and I sure as heck didn't know much. So somehow it empowered me that it's okay to not know. And art's about the inexplicable. It's about the unexplainable. And I'm not saying I'm anti-conceptual or theoretical, but that idea of wonder seems to be about the essence of what art's about. And so I love the fact that our left ear is in the shape of a question mark. And so who is the best listener in your life? Listening is so undervalued. When you lean forward and ask someone a question, and you can tell they're empowered by the fact that you actually want to listen to what they have to say, it helps you go to a deeper place in your own thoughts. But I don't know where we learn to listen. And so I just put this in because I think we all have moments in time that you never forget. And this was years ago, and that's just my T-shirt in the bottom right-hand corner. And Ferguson's asking me questions, and he's going, what do you want to say with your pots? No one had ever asked me that question. But really, the quality of the education is almost the sophistication of the questions that you're being asked. Where do you want your pots to end up? In the kitchen or the living room? Does dissonance play a role in your work? What are your feelings about beauty or the abject in your work? And so the quality of the questions that you're being asked is so important. And then this can lead to bigger questions, questions that aren't being asked in academia enough. What is success? If someone asked you, what is success? What would you say? What do you value most? What would you say? Those are the questions as a society that we need to be asked, and that's the questions that art asks. And then that is, is triggered by those wild geese, and Mary Oliver in one of her poems said, what do you want to do with your wild and precious life? What an amazing question. So I try, as a teacher, you have to be a maker, and as an art teacher, you have to create. And so when I ask students to do something, you've got to keep your life going in the studio. So in the art life class, I asked them all to make a self-portrait. And so this was my self-portrait, and I handed it in, we put them on a wall, and we all critiqued them. I asked them, you have to express something in your self-portrait. So I guess I was expressing both vulnerability and trust, I guess. So it's sort of a theme, I guess. And then the other thing, it's not, again, when you have a critique, and I think one of the most profound things I ever heard a colleague say to me, that everything you produce is a metaphor. And so I ask, sometimes seniors don't know what a metaphor is, but I'll ask them, what are the metaphors in your work? And what were the people thinking when they were making these Jamon pots? What were the tops of those pots about? Were they about swirling water? Were they about dancing flames? They were metaphors for something. So when you make something, ask yourself what that metaphor is. And there's basically everything's changing. And there's 3 different directions you could go. And the big thing right now is relational aesthetics. And Brancusi was one of the early people questioning, what's the pedestal? What's the art? And maybe the pedestal is art. So this idea of relational aesthetics, and that's a fairly recently coined phrase by Nicholas Berard in 1998. And so artists, certainly a lot of ceramic artists are questioning that as well. And this idea of the space between things, this beach stone I picked up, I kid you not, the only reason I bought that first iPhone was because of those rounded edges on the iPhone. It felt like a beach stone. They knew what they were doing when they designed that phone. They wanted that to play to your sense of tactility. And then people will always want to make things. And this is a Bob Turner piece, and there's something about, it's in our DNA to create things with our hands. So that will always be there. And then, memory traces, and there's some things you really need, I think, in education to read, and Rawson's book's one of them. But things are changing mightily, and I call it social artistic activism. And, this is a high school project. And Kate Plows, who's an amazing teacher outside of Philadelphia, had all her students make cups, and they put barcodes on the side of all the cups, and you put a smartphone up to the barcode, and it would tell you a story. And she took this up to Harvard, and they gave a whole presentation. This is high school students. So some of the creative things that are going on are just remarkable. But I do think more and more people are pushing this space between the digital world and the analog world. And it's happening whether we like it or not. And how we use that space creatively, I think in many ways is our future. But we're always trying to create a larger audience. Here I'm preaching to the choir. How can we reach a larger audience? And I think it's poignant to me. We had our basement flood last fall. We just recently got it fixed, and this carpenter, and I was really happy with the job, so I gave him a cup. And he took the cup, and he said, "What's the deal with the dent in the side? Is this a second?" And I thought this was an isolated incident, but this has happened 3 or 4 times. And if you think about it, we could have a long seminar discussion, because the craftsman, the person doing the carpentry, they want that 2x4 to fit in a certain way. They're not interested in, quote, wabi-sabi imperfections. But as artists, we need to have those conversations with the average person. And I think this idea of touch and proximity, and I've asked myself, what is it about clay? It's this permeability. As I hold the bottle is also holding me. And it sort of validates your own existence. But there's something, too, about proximity. Touch is the closest proximity of any sense we feel, other than perhaps taste. And so there's this sense of vulnerability or possibility that comes through touch. And it's a powerful thing when you're moving something and then it moves you. The clay moves you. So when people sort of say it's a dance, it is a dance, but it's even more of a dance than you might think it is. And how do you encourage this state of play? Probably some of you saw the Matisse show, and to see this photo of him cutting paper a couple years before he dies and just playing, and then taking that paper and making something out of it. If you can create joy and play in a classroom, then magic starts to happen. People start to play. And so, it's amazing, this teapot, and this just simply came out of play. So to create an environment, and I could go into it, but there's so much pressure in school. Everyone wants the students to be doing great work, and you're always telling them to take risks, but you're always also telling them you got to have great work at that critique. So that's sort of antithetical to each other in some way. So how do you create an atmosphere where people can take risks and play, and also have the high expectations? So just that idea of chance, this is just a beginning ceramics student, and somehow she made this connection between this foot and this thing. And so that idea of process saving us from the poverty of our intentions, and also just doing things that you've never done before. When I went to the Dharavi slums in India, it was around a potter for this. You get 1 million people in an area, there's always going to be potters, and this was the best potter in the Dharavi slums, and I worked with him for 2 days. It was amazing, just, again, sort of humbling myself and learning from someone that's sort of a master potter in another culture. And then also, we all, stuff happens, and it's so unpredictable in our lives. And when I went to China and I wanted to use a wheel and they didn't have a wheel, and then finally they said you could use one in a demo area, but it only has an on-off switch. It goes 0 or 60. So all of a sudden you're having to throw or use that wheel in a different way. And that type of thing happens to all of us. And so how do you adapt to that sort of unpredictability and maybe even incorporate it in your work, or maybe it's even a blessing in some way? Maybe just try stuff. And then idea of being creative in the classroom. I mean, you can come up with a new project or a new assignment or do something different in every class. And the idea that teaching is like a work of art in itself in terms of being creative or innovative is incredibly exciting to me. And that idea that quality attracts quality, there's a lot of good programs in this country. And this is Sean Spangler, Gwendolyn Leopolo, Deborah Schwarzkopf, and Doug Peltzman. And these were people that were presenters at the Utilitarian Clay Conference. And, there is all students that had worked at Penn State. And the only reason I show them is amazing how students teach other students. And if you get a few students that just are forces of energy, it's amazing what they do for the whole chemistry of the program. And this, just the structure, I do take attendance and a syllabus and give that stuff thought. I think it's really important to start on time. And so there's all little things that teachers don't talk to each other enough about. And sort of, we're slowly coming up to the end here, but, the infamous critique. And Adam Singerman said that the 3 most commonly asked questions in a critique are, have you seen this artist's work? Do you know this artist's work's name? Or have you read this book? Or have you tried this? And those questions are all fine and have their place, but interestingly enough, they're all questions about something else outside the student. Versus what questions do you want your work to ask? In other words, going inward towards the student in terms of what they have to offer. And then I think it's very important for a teacher to be aware of their own personal aesthetic. Are they asking the students just to make their own work? And for students to know their teacher's work. If I keep telling all my students to make black and white work, there's a problem with that. Basically Staley's just saying make his work the same color. Or any one of those things, tight, loose, pot, they're apples and oranges. They're just different. And the challenge for teachers is to find out what the student's way is. And then seeing. That old aphorism, God's in the details, Mies van der Rohe. It's amazing to be looking at art and you're looking at the same thing and then someone says, do you see that? Do you see the triangles in the foot? Do you see the triangle in the lug of this? Do you see the triangle in the decoration? Do you see the triangle of the foot? There is always more to see. And as a teacher, we owe it to our students to share how much you see and help them see more. And so, just a couple more slides, and this will be it. This is Stephen DeStabler, and I was at a talk that he gave out at the Archie Bray Foundation. And at the end of his talk, he had a Q&A, and I remember asking him, I said, you had Peter Volkus as one of your teachers. And he said, yes, I did. I said, what was it like having him as a teacher? And I never forgot what he said. He said, Volkus in his heyday made every single student feel like he was their favorite student. He made every student feel special. And every student has something special and remarkable to offer. A teacher just has to look and help them find what that is. And this is a young man. He's very proud of this piece he made, and they're having a show, an exhibition of his work. And I've never liked the word critique. If you encourage somebody or give them words of affirmation, it's amazing how inspiring and motivating that can be. So I'm a real advocate of just affirmation and positive encouragement. And then this idea of change. And I think that that's the greatest human quality that we have, is that this is a brick wall that just washed up on a beach. And all of us are like this brick wall. We have this potential to change and evolve. And perhaps that's our greatest potential and quality as our human being, is that we don't have to be the person that we were yesterday. We can be something different and more special tomorrow. And, you get to a point in your life and you start looking at things a bit differently. And a lot of the giants, a lot of my teachers are gone, they passed away. And recently Tony Hepburn passed away, and his family said, would former students send pieces of pottery or sculpture we'd like to bury with Tony? So I gave Shannon Goff some, and Shannon went up to his funeral, and I was looking at this old cup that I gave a shard, and I couldn't throw the cup away. And I realized that in many ways, the teachers don't die. They stay on in all of us. And there's something eternal about teaching. And so this is sort of an old photograph, and that's my father on the right, number 55, and they won, and he was Dartmouth, the 1951 Dartmouth football team. And I remember years ago how incredibly vibrant and dynamic my dad was. And this is him last spring. And this is just not my father. It's your father, it's your mother, it's your sister, it's your brother, it's your friends. And all those people touch your lives in some special way. And I love the fact that this dog, Roka, normally pulls people along. But even Roka knew to walk behind my father and let my dad lead. And I do believe that it is in the giving that we receive. In the last two slides, this is Manet, Edward Manet. And he had an exhibition, I think, in 1868, and all the work sold in that. And the collector who bought this said to the gallery owner, "Tell Manet this painting is amazing. I'm giving him twice the money he asked for." So Manet came to the gallery, and the director said, "Someone bought that bundle of white asparagus painting, and they paid twice, and they say your paintings are amazing." And Manet was so touched by this gesture, he went back to his studio, and he painted another painting, and he wrapped it up very carefully, and he sent it to him, and he's simple with a simple note, "Thank you so much, you forgot one." Thank you for your time.